Oh, hello, Paul. Hi. Richard's just stepped out. How's that cold of yours?
Oh, I feel like death warmed up, Tim. How's the laryngitis?
Well, mustn't grumble. I'm a bit gargly. Richard's here. With the arrival of our ally Paul, we are enough. The meeting can now begin.
No, it can't.
What's wrong?
There is a hostile presence among us.
What do you mean?
On arrival here, I am told that there is unknown person among us.
Not among us.
Then here on the podcast, something who?
Oh, you mean Jack? Look, we had a chat earlier, and it will appear on the podcast, but don't worry, it's just us here now.
Suppose she sends a message through this podcast.
It's already recorded. It can't stop our plans to conquer the galaxy, okay?
Agreed.
Agreed.
All are agreed. It is done. 3 great powers of podcasting are one.
This is indeed an historic moment in the history of this podcast. We too from Something Who, joining with the power behind Doctor Who and the podcasters, Tim.
The 3 of us represent the greatest podcast force ever assembled.
Well, since that Terrence Dicks episode anyway.
Conquest is assured. USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand.
They will all fall before our might, but the first of them will be the United Kingdom!
Oh, splendid. Utterly splendid. Hello and welcome to Something Who. It's another of our special episodes, this time looking at Mission to the Unknown, in light of the recently released remake from the University of Central Lancashire. Here for a chat are Paul and Tim, and as we alluded to in the sketch, we have a special podcast guest, the author and DWM columnist, Jack Rayner. For logistical reasons, Jack appears in her own segment shortly. So chaps, hello, how are you?
Hey up.
Hello. Genuinely a bit throaty, but I shall struggle through.
It's splendid.
I'm surprised to hear you swearing on your own podcast, Richard. Lancashire? I thought you Yorkshire folk naturally avoided mentioning the name of the superior county over the Pennines.
I have a dark secret in my past. Or my
What?
family's past. Well, which is that 2 of my grandparents come from Lancashire. And also, I spent some time on the west side of the Pennines, ultimately in Cheshire, but I did spend a year living in Northern as well. So,
Well, all is not lost. You're like a reverse Michael Vaughan. I don't think I should stay in. I can't stay in.
I would never have known. It doesn't show. So
Where's Giles?
well, he made some weak excuse about being off travelling, so he couldn't make it tonight.
He's avoiding me. How many of these have I done now?
This is the 3rd.
The 3rd.
Yeah.
It's nearly as many as him. He's avoiding me. I think I've upset him.
let's be honest, it's quite likely.
Well, I thought we got on, but things haven't been the same since I mentioned to him that I was catching the train to Exeter from Waterloo East. And I popped into the Foyles. I think it's a Foyles. Anyway, there's a small bookshop in there, and I saw his book, and it's fantastic. It's The Genius Test. And when I saw him about it, I was telling him how wonderful I thought it to be, but explained that it was a good book for the toilet. Because it's all in very short sections. So for my rhythms, it's just the perfectly chaptered book. And occasionally you sit there too long and go a bit numb-legged because you're reading through these various questions of society or science, and it's absolutely fantastic. But I'm not sure he took the compliment as it was intended. He even went to Germany to get married so he didn't have to invite me. I mean... So Giles and I have yet to record a podcast together, and I'm taking it personally.
Crikey.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, you're the second person to be bigging him up on this podcast, as our listeners are about to hear. So yeah, so even though he's not on the podcast, he's got a couple of mentions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe they're friends of old, Jack and Giles.
Well, Jack, if you're listening, don't mention don't mention where you read his books if it's.
Otherwise, that 20-odd years of friendship will just end like that.
I mentioned it once, but I think I got away with it. Okay. Well, look, I've been hoping to get Jack Rayner as a guest on this podcast for quite a while, but finally we found a subject that was a powerful enough enticement to get her on. She's well known, I think, in fan circles for enthusiasm about Mission to the Unknown and the alien delegates, and there's more of that coming up. So I spoke with Jack yesterday for just over half an hour. The audio quality is slightly lower than our usual because we recorded it via Skype, but it's perfectly audible, and I'm sure you'll agree that Jack is very compelling, and you'll find it no barrier to hearing her. So I'm going to drop the recorded segment in now, and then when it's done, we'll come back and add our thoughts to it. I think easily the best known member of fandom to grace this podcast. We've got Big Finish and BBC Books writer, Doctor Who Monthly contributor and original Time team member, Jack Rayner. Hello.
Hello.
So welcome to Something Who.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, you've got Giles there who's been on Only Connect and telly and things. That's obviously a bit better known fandom person.
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, but let's not big him up, otherwise he might hear this and get too big ahead. And we have Paul, who's also a Big Finish writer. So yeah, I mean, it's really just me who's a complete nobody. But very good. Okay. So as well as redressing the fact that so far our podcasts have been entirely male, so that's it's good to get a different point of view. Also, we've asked you on particularly to talk about Mission to the Unknown.
Yes, I love it.
Because sort of specialised area of yours.
Yeah.
And the remake of that was released last week.
Yeah.
So maybe we could start with you talking about how you first came across Mission to the Unknown.
Oh dear. I mean, I just don't know, because I've been a Doctor Who fan for, donkey's years now, back to childhood. And you just pick up things as you go along. You start reading Doctor Who magazine, reading the targets, etc., and sort of along the way, you just absorb lots of things. And missing episodes was just one of those things that just held so much fascination for me. I love history. If anyone's listened to any of my Big Finish or read any of my books, I do go into history a lot. Mm-hmm. And that's always been the appeal of, delving into things to try and find out solutions to mysteries. And once I started to hear about Doctor Who missing episodes, it was just, oh God, I so want to know what they were about. And the thing about Mission to the Unknown is, of course, it's one of only 3 stories that we have absolutely no footage of whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But we have these photos, which are just these strange, monstery things. And that's another thing that I just so love about 60s Doctor Who, particularly the Hartnell era. It's got this sort of innocence alongside huge imagination. They just create these creatures of the future. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to know more about them. So I couldn't tell you at what point it turned from, just a sort of, I've seen a few pictures of these things. I think it was probably not until we sort of got into the 1990s that I started to figure out that there were things that we had no record of, things that we just didn't know at all. You sort of think, we've got the scripts for everything, we've got the soundtracks for everything, so pretty much we must know everything, and we really, really don't. And there was a point where Doctor Who magazine printed a picture of Salation, the second Salation, or potentially third Salation. And that was just so exciting. It was so exciting. So, yeah, the actual question about when I first became aware of Mission to the Unknown, I don't know. It was just a name that you heard somewhere along the line. And as you get older and we get more and more background knowledge of the show coming out, because, you know, when I was a kid, there was, you know, The Making of Doctor Who by Terence Dicks and Malcolm Hulke, and you had the Peter Haining books, and all of it was new to you. Because you didn't have access to UK Gold repeats or VHS, anything like that. So absolutely everything felt like a missing episode. And somewhere along the line, things started to split into missing episodes that are actually missing and missing episodes that are out there somewhere. And, you know, wouldn't it be amazing if one day you could actually see one, to having a shelf full of DVDs. So, yeah, that's a very, very long way of saying, I don't know the answer to your question. Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah. I mean, indeed, I think probably for me it was the 10th anniversary Radio Times special.
Yes.
I think I got a chance to look at a Friends one of those in the mid to late 70s, I think, and that probably would be the first time I saw a list of stories, be it probably tied with The Making of Doctor Who, as you mentioned. But neither of those really gave very much of an idea about what the story was about. And of course, the Target book didn't come out until quite late.
It wasn't out until I had temporarily stopped being a Doctor Who fan. I had the little gap sort of coming up to GCSEs until I got into university, where I was not a Doctor Who fan at all, and I missed out this big chunk, particularly where all the rare Target books came out. So I didn't have any of the rare Target books. Yeah, that was, so it wasn't a book that I read when I was a kid. No, so
yeah, which sort of added to the mystique, didn't it, of a missing story? There wasn't even the Target to help us work out what was going on. And the soundtrack, I'm trying to think, I got the CD version of that when that came out, which was probably about the turn of the century. But, you know, that was a long time into my being a fan. So, yeah, it's been coming back to us in pieces and very slowly, I think.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. This could be the closest we ever get, this remake.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I was not expecting to be that worried about it. Like I've said, missing episodes for me is about the mysteries.
Yeah.
So, you know, if Mission to the Unknown had existed all these years, as in, you know, we had a viewing copy, I think I would have probably counted it as a favourite, I would imagine, because, as I say, I have a bit of a thing about these Hartnell monsters and the whole future as seen through the prism of 1960s television. You know, I still adore the Ark, and various other ones which exist, you know, Chase, all sorts which have things in them, and I still absolutely love them. And I think that Mission to the Unknown would have ranked alongside them.
Yeah.
But I think possibly wouldn't be quite so really, really deeply into it if it wasn't for the mystery aspect. So having somebody recreate it, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, that's nice. I'd like to see it, and that's great fun, but it's not solving any mysteries for me, because it's not, it's building on things which I've already seen, like the camera script and the photos. Yes.
Yeah. But perhaps, to some extent, the actual making of it does actually break through. I mean, I'm trying to think. So it will only build on what we already know about it, but perhaps we discover something new about it by seeing it, even though it is just built on what we already know.
Yes, and it also actually, it prompts you to ask questions which you possibly hadn't. I mean, there's a bit where the delegates are all sort of supposed to sign something, and you think, God, how on earth would that have been done when most of them don't have any arms? I mean, probably my absolute tiny favourite moment in the recreation was Centrial, otherwise Mr. Christmas Tree.
Yeah.
There's bits where they're just lines given to a planetarian, so we don't know exactly who says which little bit. But he has this line in the new one, and he does a little nod of his head when he's talking. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, oh wow, I wonder if that's what it was like when Centrial was talking. Did he sort of wobble his head up and down, like that? And it's a question I hadn't fully asked myself. And possibly no one else in the world had asked themselves that question of, did Centrial waggle his head up and I just love that little bit. So you're right. It doesn't, while it can't really answer any huge questions, it can point us in the direction of things, which would be really interesting to know. But yes, I did love it. I absolutely loved it. Mark Corey, the actor, I think his name's Marco.
Yeah.
He was brilliant. He was brilliant. I'll tell you a secret.
Yeah.
I'm friends with Mark Wright, who works for Doctor Who magazine quite a lot. Does loads of other writing. We're very good friends. And he texted me and said, this is top secret, but you'll never guess where I am. And he was there following it for Doctor Who magazine. So I kept getting these little snippets of, I've just seen this, and I've just seen this, and I've just seen this. And, that did whet my appetite considerably. If people haven't read Mark's articles about the making of it, they really should. In Doctor Who magazine a few months ago, there is the little making of video that's been put up on YouTube as well, and that was absolutely lovely, but I would have liked it to have been about 17 times longer.
Yeah.
I just really wanted to know how they made decisions for the costumes and the props and the voices, and how much did they listen to the sound. I tell you, this is another thing which just shows. I watched the recreation and played the soundtrack of the original so I could see the differences, and the human actors, wow. They just did not absolute copies of, but they just had the voices so right. They didn't go into 60s parody, which it would be very easy to do, the BBC RP type thing, but they didn't. I mean, when I watched it for the first time, I actually spent the first couple of minutes thinking, hang on, are they actually lip syncing to the soundtrack? It was that close.
Yes.
But I would have really liked to have seen a really, really, really long making of showing, how they decided how to make the costumes.
Yeah.
And I really don't want to be picky or negative, but there's some of the delegates' costumes which aren't quite as similar to the originals.
Yeah.
But they're so close that it would be incredibly churlish to criticise them for that. But I wanted to know, how they decided on what materials to use. Was it all things that they could have had in the 60s? And that's just because, it's just something I would love to go into real depth about. And probably not many people would watch a 7-hour making of. But really, the job they did was just fabulous. And so from going from, it's not going to answer any questions for me, so I'm not that bothered, I went to, oh God, I want to watch this 17 times in a row now. Which I didn't. My children were with me, and they they were content with one view through, but
Yes.
no.
Yes, I thought perhaps it might have benefited slightly from a bit of 1960s fuzz or sort of slightly degraded tape. So there were one or two bits where you could almost see too much because it was really sharp. But I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was both really faithful and quite magical. I mean, I know we've had this year where we haven't had any new Doctor Who to watch, and I found it actually quite exciting sitting down and being able to watch this and get something of a window back into 1965 and into what it would have been like to see that first time through.
Absolutely. I couldn't tell you what book this is in, so it's going to be a really rubbish recommendation. But the writer Ian Potter did an absolutely astonishing article about how things were filmed in 1960 television. It was really eye-opening for me because it wasn't something I knew a lot about. And again, reading Mark Wright's articles in Doctor Who magazine saying, how much they wanted to act like they were making 1960s television. Again, I would have just liked to know in exact tiny detail, how they followed that through. But from what I can see, they were incredibly authentic as far as they could be within what resources they had. What started me talking about that? Did you ask me a question? Sorry.
I don't think I did actually, because I was just saying that I thought it was a fascinating to get a glimpse back into what it might have been like to see the original. I suppose in one or two examples, I mean, for instance, the Dalek voices, the extant recording, it's one of those ones where the modulation's down a little bit and it doesn't quite sound the way we remember Daleks in our heads, unless, of course, I've remembered them wrong.
No, I think Nick Briggs actually addressed that, but I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something about how there was possibly during the recording things were up and down with the modulation, and so he didn't recreate that exactly, but he did try to do sort of impressions of Peter Hawkins or whoever was doing the voices, but the actual way they were treated wasn't exactly as it was for Mission to the Unknown. So again, he was obviously doing it as authentic as possible, but through the filter of how things are done practically. Yeah, the Dalek voices don't sound absolutely identical to the soundtrack, but they fit very well.
Yeah,
so.
Indeed. And to my ears, I think that what Nick has done with that is to make it more like the Daleks we imagine, rather than perhaps the Daleks as they were. I mean, in my own head as a boy and then growing up, the Daleks were a real menace. And then sometimes when you saw them on screen, either the later appearances on the original series or the black and white ones repeated, they didn't quite live up to the memories we had of them. But those voices sound really menacing to me.
Absolutely.
So I guess coming back to the delegates, there's really only Malfa, is it, who has a speaking part?
Yeah, he's the main speaking role.
And in this one, something of a Lancastrian accent, I think.
Yes.
And perhaps a little bit less treatment on that. I mean, on the soundtrack, it sounded to me like they'd gone for more of a modulated alien type tone. Yes, I think you're probably right.
But no, I mean it absolutely worked. And I think, like we said, for the human actors, there was always a danger of going into parody, which they did not do. And it's the same for the monsters. There's got to be that line between trying to imitate, which goes to parody, and the person actually acting. So, as you say, a slight accent for Malfa, which was not there in the original, but, the guy was acting the part rather than just, being sort of a spitting image type, over-the-top Malfa as on soundtrack. So, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's absolutely fine.
So has this whetted your appetite maybe for seeing more of a Daleks master plan, if ever that were feasible?
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. Although how they would make decisions there on what to do, I really don't know. But yeah, I mean, wouldn't that be such fun? That would just be
because they changed just about every time they appeared, didn't they? The aliens, something like that.
They did, yes, and it's very contentious and confusing as to who's who. We have things on paperwork, and then we have things which are on screen, and you've got the duvet-headed guy in Mission to the Unknown, who in the remake had a little moustache, which was quite a fun touch.
Yeah.
And he never appears again, as far as we know, in Dalek Master Plan. But he is in the paperwork. I think it's either costume or makeup. He is listed as Trantis.
Right.
When you get to Dalek Master Plan, you have a character played by Roy Evans called Trantis.
Yeah.
But he looks like the guy from Mission to the Unknown who's got the spikes on his face, but he doesn't have the spikes on his face. So you would imagine that they were supposed to be the same person, but they changed names. It's almost impossible to describe really without tying yourself up in complete knots. But yes, for almost every appearance from Mission to early Master Plan to middle Master Plan, the delegates have changed appearance or changed names. New ones have appeared who may have the same names as earlier ones. You've got your Christmas tree, which we're almost certain goes with the name Centriol, except that name is never on screen. So, you know, and not written in the dialogue. We just happen to know that in the script it lists, you know, the names of them, and that's one. And by process of elimination, that's the Christmas tree. He never appears again. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of the Daleks' fault, really. You know, they invited all these people to insist on photo IDs. So, you know, anyone turned.
No name tags, no nothing.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's very complicated, but it's also fun to try and work out who is who.
Sure.
The Christmas tree costume probably, you know, went back into storage or was taken to pieces, and they couldn't be bothered or couldn't find the bits for Master Plan, and so they, you know, stuck a body stocking on someone else and gave it a different name. But yeah,
it was only 4 weeks, wasn't it? It was the Myth Makers and then back into Master Plan from Mission to the Unknown. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder they could have lost so much in such a short space of time.
I know. My son asked me this very morning. He said, if they release that on DVD, meaning the reconstruction, would you put it on the shelf next to Dalek Master Plan or before Myth Makers? And I was like, before Myth Makers, of course. Before clicking that, I don't have a Myth Makers DVD on the shelf, alas. But if I did, obviously it will go before that. Yes. So. But yeah, I mean, there was. Oh, sorry. Can you hear that meowing?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Every podcast should have a cat.
She's just jumped up next to me. So yes, I think really because Mission to the Unknown, and then there was a big gap for Myth Makers, and then Dalek's Master Plan, you can sort of excuse there being differences, but then you've got the differences between the early episodes of Master Plan and the later ones, where the actual extras weren't available, or, you know, don't quite know why. We don't know, but they changed things just from week to week there. So
yes, and that's, I suppose that quite an important source is episode 2 of Master Plan that came back about 15 years ago, and it's quite a different setup in that, isn't it? There's a big semicircular desk that they're all behind, rather than this map that they've got in Mission.
Yes. Oh, in the camera script for Mission to the Unknown, it says each of the delegates or planetarians has a lectern with their name on.
Right.
Which, as far as we know, it doesn't appear in any of the photos. There are no names in any of the photos. So I would imagine that didn't happen. It was just, this would be nice, but it didn't happen. And that was an interesting thing in the remake, because if they're going directly from the camera script, they should have had lecterns with names on, but they didn't. They basically recreated the photos, which I would say is the right call, because that is probably what was on screen.
Yeah.
But yes, you just say the word delegates, and I just go off on one for 20 minutes.
This is absolute gold. I mean, the only other thing, I guess, that we could have hoped to see was a grouping of delegates with Verity Lambert. That's the other famous photo from it. Although quite how we'd have explained that in the story, I'm not quite sure.
But isn't that one of those amazing things? Because if Verity Lambert had not been leaving, almost certainly we wouldn't have these photos, because that's, they had the photo call with her. Yeah. And we would not have had all these pictures. I would, think almost certainly. So we're incredibly lucky for Mission to the Unknown, because it is just this one tiny little obscure episode with no Doctor, no companions. And yeah, if Verity Lambert hadn't been leaving, we would still almost certainly, just not know what any of these delegates look like at all. Whoa, that would be very sad. Very sad indeed. But yeah, with episode 2, Day of Armageddon coming back, that overturned everything.
Yeah.
Because up to that point, I think people thought, the Christmas tree was in Dalek Master Plan. We suddenly discover he isn't. Therefore, we rearrange the names and figure out that, he's Centrial, because he's the one that doesn't appear later, and, things like that. There was, they showed a clip on, I think, the 6 o'clock news with Mavic Chen. And then it cut to about half a second of Zephon coming down a slope.
Oh, yes.
It was like, oh my God, that was a delegate. And we sort of knew what Zephon looked like, because we've got that one shot of him menacing Mavic Chen. Yeah. But this was him moving and with clothes on and, all this stuff. So, the news, they focused on the Daleks, and, we knew what the Daleks looked like. And we had to wait to see the delegates. And yeah, I think the first thing was possibly BBC Online putting it up as a photo book, and you suddenly saw all these. Myself and all the many other delegate scholars in Doctor Who fandom suddenly realised we had to tear up most of our research. But yeah, that was amazing. That really was. Of all episodes to come back, that is very possibly the one that gave us so much new information. Yeah. Oh, just so exciting. So exciting. I'm still excited now.
Well, you've only had 15 years, so it's perfectly understandable.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it probably spent the previous 15 years in doing the rounds of various offices in the BBC and ITV. So.
I used to work at BBC Worldwide at one point, and very occasionally I got sent down to the BBC Photo Library and TV Centre to pick out something for a DVD cover or a book cover for reference.
Yeah.
And it never occurred to me, it just never occurred to me to say, could I go through absolutely everything, please? That would be lovely. Because I was very much like, it's TV Centre and this is all big and important, and, I'll just go in there eventually, because the photo library, it was a bit like Castrovalva. I never got there the same way twice, and usually had to ask about 6 people along the way.
Wow.
But it was, oh wow, you're letting me look in this folder. Yes, I'll have that one, please. Could you do me a copy? And then later, with my whole missing photos, missing episodes thing, and it turned out the picture of Cassandra from the Mythmakers had been in the photo library all along. Just, I could have found that. I could have found a picture of Cassandra, but I was too nervous to just go through all the racks and all the folders. I really, really, really wasted my opportunities when I was at BBC Worldwide, they would probably have let me go to Caversham if I'd asked and go through all the files there. You know, I could say, yes, I'm working on Doctor Who releases, so it's an official reason I could go. Yeah. They would probably have said yes. Yeah. Did I ever think of trying that? No. I was a rubbish Doctor Who fan. Absolutely rubbish. Very ashamed of myself in retrospect.
Well, look, I mean, we've all wasted opportunities. I managed to spend 3 years as an undergraduate in Cambridge without ever finding out where the Footlights Club was, for instance. So, you know, it's very easy just to kind of, you know, get on and do the thing that you think you're supposed to be doing and not explore to either side.
Absolutely. Thank you. It makes me feel very slightly better. But only very slightly.
So we might still hold out hope, I suppose, that the episode of Mission to the Unknown, which I think last known abode was Singapore, might possibly have found its way into Africa or somewhere else, and you know, still be somewhere waiting to be found. I mean, it seems increasingly unlikely now with time, but you never know. We've got to hold out a little bit of hope.
Absolutely. I mean, who would have dreamt we'd have got Enemy of the World and nearly all of Web of Fear back? You know, absolutely seemed impossible, but it happened. So yeah, let's not give up hope.
Either that or Damien Shanahan's Bond store in Sydney, which I suppose is another one that's been held out tantalisingly for us the last few years without any resolution.
Yeah, I actually only heard of that the other day.
All right.
I don't really sort of follow stuff on missing episodes because I find it incredibly depressing.
Yes, it's very, very sensible. Very sensible. There's a lot of detours and dark alleys.
Yeah. But no, the lovely Toby Haydock was telling me about that the other day because we were talking about Mission to the Unknown, and it was like, oh, you mean there is cause for hope? Oh, and I didn't know, and now I'm going to be hoping again.
Oh, it's the hope that kills you, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Well, look, I mean, you've been fantastic, and you've stayed longer than I dared hope. So thanks for all of that.
I'm sorry, actually. It really is just, if people mention delegates to me, I just run on, and you'll probably find that most of this isn't usable. So just, you know, chop out tiny little bits that are okay, and don't worry.
I find it extraordinarily unlikely that people wouldn't want to listen to information about delegates for hours on end. So,
well, you have a point there, I suppose. Yeah. Most sensible people would like that. Yes. Yeah.
Well, look, thanks very much.
That's okay.
It's been great, and if things align, it'd be great to have you on again. But this has been fantastic.
Thank you.
Crikey.
So I gather you two have listened to the recorded section.
Yes. How marvellous!
Thoroughly enjoyed it. It's yes, I mean it's slightly raised the bar for our ramblings.
I did think we'd better look to our laurels after.
If only by virtue of unbridled enthusiasm. It was a brilliant listen. Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Richard. It was really enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be delighted, as I said on the piece, to have her back, although I rather feel that if anyone else hears that, we'll be outbid by some of the other podcasts. But anyway, let's see. So the first thing I wanted to do was to ask you what your experience had been of Mission to the Unknown over the years and how you'd come across it.
Go on, Paul.
I think I've said before how the Doctor Who programme guide, was that about 1981? Loomed large in my childhood. Had a big influence on me. Even though it was just lots of lists and facts and things, because, you know, I'm a slightly odd person then as now. And I loved particularly the charts at the beginning with the pure list of episodes, stories with the number of episodes against them. I love the little patterns those made us, the completely random lengths of stories in the first couple of seasons. Yeah. Then the way it settles down to 4-parters, but don't get to season 3, with those two strange exceptions, a massive bulge of the Daleks' master plan and the odd little... microscopic mission, 1-parter, Mission to the Unknown, and that's So, without even thinking about what the story was about, I was just entranced by the idea of this complete and utter oddity.
Mm.
As you mentioned with Jack, there weren't many other ways to experience the story apart from that very brief paragraph. You couldn't hear it, you couldn't read the script or a novelization or anything for at least another couple of decades.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering if even Doctor Who Monthly had covered it as an archive, but I couldn't see a reference to it before about 200 and odd.
Doctor Who Weekly went through and did each story in turn.
Yes.
Yes,
did it get as far as season 3?
I remember. I remember the Celestial Toymaker issue very clearly. So they must have done. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
They could have folded it in with Dalek's Master Plan. I don't know.
Hmm.
See, our research has failed already. We're only a couple of minutes in. Somebody rush off to the attic and check.
No, I'm afraid we're not doing that.
Oh, okay. Tim, what are your first memories of the existence/non-existence of Mission to the Unknown?
Well, I'm a little bit younger than you, Paul. I'm 30 or 40 years younger than Richard, and so I've just looked up when the novelisation came out, and it was 1989.
Right.
So I was in a phase of being carted round various northern towns by my parents, going to flea markets and the like.
They were trying to sell you.
Is that what they were doing?
Oh, sorry.
No, they weren't. They were being lovely and parenty
Okay.
and taking me round to a couple of flea markets which had Doctor Who stalls on. So it was around that time that I would have started investing in the Target novels rather than buying one or two as they came out in the shops. So about 10 years old, and I bought Mission to the Unknown and The Mutation of Time, the 2-part John Peel novelisation, at a flea market in Bolton called Bygone Days, I think it was called. And this is the chap who went, "All right, Mash, you interested in the missing episodes?" And I said, "Yeah, why? What?" He said, and he said he didn't have a sort of London spiv accent. That was a bit of my. It would have been a northern spiv, a Bolton spiv accent.
All right, there.
All right, la. And he offered to give me all of the missing episodes on VHS for I think it was around £200. And I just got dragged out to be told you're not having them. Anyway, there were probably audios or something, but they're on VHS. I don't know. Oh, he was a con man. So anyway, yes, I remember distinctly buying. It must have been about 1990, 91, buying that 2-part, and it's about the same time as that I started really getting to grips with the program lists, and then became aware of the 1-part standalone that looked a bit different to the rest of Dalek's Master Plan and felt a bit weird and was in a different production block, so had different continuity things going on. So so initially I wasn't very fond of it at all, and over the years, having listened to it 2, 3, 4, 10 times, I've grown fonder of it, shall we say.
I'm just wondering if you'd ever told that anecdote to Richard Molesworth. I mean, it could take Wiped Edition 3 in a very different direction.
Yeah, well, I tried to make some inquiries about the guy, but I traced him back to his mother's house about 30 miles west, and all that I was told was he'd gone off to be a crane operator on oil rigs or something. So I don't know what came of him. He's probably very happy manoeuvring around things on oil rigs.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go on.
That's all right. Completely thrown my train of thought. What was I saying?
It was something along the lines of you'd listen to it 3 or 4 or 7 times.
Yes, and never particularly fondly, but I really rather enjoy it the last few times I've listened to it, with a few exceptions, although I sort of laugh along with the sillinesses rather than worry about them. I've been worrying about one thing for a few days since watching the Recon, the very splendid Recon. For instance, these are the things I worry about.
Mm-hmm.
What was the average awareness of the child in the UK? You were a bit too old at the time, Richard, so you won't be able to remember. Of James Bond. I've done a little bit of Google fearing, and
Yeah.
the first Bond film didn't appear on TV until the early 70s, and it was Goldfinger or From Russia with Love.
Yeah.
So I just wonder how...
And
go
were
on,
they?
go on, go on, Paul.
Would you think they were X-rated or adult-rated?
I don't
They
know.
wouldn't have seen them at the cinema, would they?
They
But
were pretty
I
gritty.
think if my dad's anything to go by, they would have been reading them if they were allowed to smuggle the books past their parents.
Yeah.
You're a child who's interested in that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Which you might think
I
would-
just worry about how blatant that line is, where Corey, who is very much James Bond, he isn't so much in the remake. He's got a different energy, the character, but the D'Souza Mark Corey is very much James Bond. He's just killing people without thinking about it. He's got that sort of whiskey and cigar voice, hasn't he? And he hands his card over to Lowry. And Larry says, "License to kill." I've been worrying about how blatant that line would have been, and therefore how cheap it would have been. Or what, rather, would it have been perhaps a slightly more sophisticated nod than we're thinking
think-
about? I don't know.
I mean, this might be a time to bring in the fact that it's entirely possible Dennis Spooner, the script editor, contributed to the script. Although we often think of it as the archetypal Terry Nation story, all of his obsessions condensed down into 25 minutes. I was reading, I'm going to refer to Tatwood's About Time here for the first of many occasions. He suggests that you can see some of Dennis Spooner's fingerprints. And it makes me wonder if perhaps Dennis Spooner got the script in, saw exactly what Terry was going for, and maybe put in some more knowing winks, like the inclusion of that line.
I don't know. It smacks to me of a typical cheap, lazy Terry Nation trope that he'd shove in there, along with the man-eating plants, or well, the carnivorous plants anyway, for the second Dalek story running, because previously in The Chase it was so it just struck me as lazy. But I've been trying to find some forgiveness in there, thinking, was it a more sophisticated nod? Because the children of 1965 may not have been as aware of that line as we are, and we're thoroughly saturated with it. I don't know.
Well,
it matters not. But we've had a good 10 minutes on that one line.
again, we failed to ask anybody, so we haven't done that. We failed in our research. If you're getting on in years, listener, please do tweet us or get in touch by any other means and tell us whether the James Bond references would have meant anything to you or not. And then we'll know. We won't put it into a future edition. We'll just file it away.
The other silliness, and it is a silliness in there, which I laugh along with, but I've always thought was just plain stupid, was you have the Daleks and the alien delegates discussing how they will conquer the universe and the solar system, and so on and so forth.
Everything between those two extremes.
Yes.
Will be theirs.
Yeah, they mix up their terminology a little bit. But then they are so excited about their plan that they decide to tell whoever may be around on Kemble through their loudspeaker system.
Oh, very good, yeah.
Plaid Life of Kemble, we have an announcement, which Mark Corey then hears.
It's a bit shameless, isn't it? I mean, at least normally people have the grace to have our heroes just accidentally happening to be standing outside an open window or something.
Yeah.
But I guess in 25 minutes you can't afford to set up situations as complex as that.
Yeah. So
Even eavesdropping is too sophisticated for this.
So they're the little bits that I
Yeah.
sort of used to worry me a lot more than they do.
I mean,
but-
this is the 1960s, so perhaps they just projected their voices rather more impressively in those days.
Yeah, indeed. But yeah, I do enjoy it. Those three little sillinesses aside, I think it's a great little adventure in 25 minutes. It's coherent. It sets the scene. It's an odd place by virtue of where it was in the production block. I think you and Jack talked about it in that it comes 5 episodes in to the season, but that was just by virtue of the loss of the Planet of Giants episode.
Yeah.
And so it would have been better at the end of the previous season or at the start of season 3. But that doesn't worry me. I think it's a good little story, good performances, good cast.
The closest I can find to an explanation for why it's positioned where it is because the regulars' contracts are up at exactly that point, and they were due a holiday. I don't know if that's true or not, but it sounds like the sort of thing that might make sense.
Yeah, well, they had the spare episode to play with, but I think it probably let them. Yeah, they were due a holiday, perhaps. Yeah.
Actually, the contract thing can't be true, can it? Because of course, Maureen O'Brien carries on for another 4, and then her contract's up. So.
So tell me, Paul, what else have you ripped shamelessly out of the About Time paperback?
Do you know? Well, I'll just throw in a random fact. I've got nothing else to say on the subject of Dennis Spooner's possible contributions, but apparently he wrote an episode of Fireball XL5, which was set on the jungle planet Kemble.
Oh, right.
So, yes, and they Kemble rather than Kembel.
Yeah. So although most of the names are traditional Terry Nation obsessions, they sound very nation-y. Perhaps he fiddled with one or two of them. Again, something I'd not spotted, which should have been perfectly obvious, is that the number 7 crops up so much in Terry Nation's work, and not just Blake 7, of course. There's a semi-sequel to this and the Daleks' Master Plan. The script he wrote for a potential Dalek spin-off, the first episode of which is called The Destroyers.
Yes.
Big Finish have produced it, and that features a robot called Mark 7. So it's interesting that this James Bond theme may have carried on beyond just the stylings of Mark Corwin's no-nonsense approach. And Sarah Kingdom survives into the Destroyers. I don't think anyone's looked into it closely enough to... it's possible it was set before this, but because it wasn't supposed to matter, it wasn't for Doctor Who, it was supposed to be this pilot for taking the Daleks off into their own world.
Well, that was one of my thoughts on watching the recon the other day, in that I don't know if you two have seen those Terry Nation Dalek Army Nation Army videos, which are absolutely glorious.
Yes, the level of research in them is certainly greater than ours.
It's almost comedic, the level of research, isn't it? It's almost a parody of Richard Bignell, in that it goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and I found them absolutely glorious to watch. I would pay for a DVD copy of them, but they talked about the Destroyers and the Terry Nation project, which nearly came to be. Although in varying degrees as to how much you read the rhetoric as they try to blackmail the BBC into whatever. But I had that very much in mind when I watched the recon, and it did seem like a bit of it was very much a testing ground for this secret agent in space thing, and it made it to the annuals, the Dalek annuals, and all sorts of stuff. So it was. I'm not quite sure of the timeline of its production, but it's very much part of Terry Nation's thoughts about launching this thing in America. But yes, listeners, if you've not watched the Terry Nation Army videos, I'm sure most of you have, but they are an absolute celebration. I'm feeling pretty in the pink, actually, as a fan of Classic Who this year. I think we've been absolutely spoiled rotten. We've had this latterly this Mission to the Unknown. We've had the Terry Nation Army videos, another brilliant fan production, and then I'm currently wallowing in the Trial of a Time Lord box set. I'm really savouring it and enjoying all the extras, old and new, and I think it's a wonderful time to be a classic Doctor Who fan. I really do. I feel very lucky.
An unexpected bonus this episode, isn't it?
Yes.
It's much more interesting than I was expecting it to be, and that's not because I didn't have faith in the people behind it, but I've just never been particularly enamoured by Mission to the Unknown. I didn't go back and check, but we did a whole podcast on Series 3, didn't we, Tim? And I think I put it quite low because I just didn't really count it. I didn't really care.
Yeah.
But I've enjoyed it more with every successive version, and it is hilarious to me that this strange oddity from that season, which is in itself represented to the extent that it is on such a variety of mismatched formats. But
yeah.
this one story sums all that up. There's there are no photographs. The Loose Cannon Recon is entirely made of photo composites. That's a labour of love.
Yeah.
Taking pictures of the actors from other roles and dressing them up in space suits and then moving around.
Spacesuits from the Sontaran experiment.
Are they?
Yeah.
I mean, so that that is a heroic effort, but it didn't really bring the story to life for me. Then in Levine's cartoon version, which I was lucky enough to grab a copy of from wherever it was leaked to. Sorry, Ian. Which have either of you seen that? I mean,
yes, it's brilliant. Yes, it's.
That's looking back at it again. I was the animation's very almost on a par with what we're getting officially now. It's a similar style.
I prefer it, to be honest. I really, really like it. It's the definitive version for me, and will remain the definitive version because it has the audio.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so that added an extra layer. The movement brings it to life, and then this, wow, yes, suddenly I understand. Suddenly I can see it, and it's got enough of the atmosphere of the original, because how could it fail to? I mean. Sorry, it could have failed to, because it isn't easy to conjure up that 60s atmosphere, and it's a composite of a 60s atmosphere and something that was dated even in the 60s. I mean, if you think about it, if you just look at the soundtrack,
I was just going to say the soundtrack,
the sound effects, the music, it's the stuff of melodrama. It's a combination of James Bond and I don't know,
it's
early
like
cinema melodrama.
You remember the Robinson Crusoe kind of black and white thing from about 1930? They used to sorry, I don't know why I'm saying this, because you won't remember it because you're younger than me. But every school holidays they used to bung this thing on, and it had a very similar kind of sounding, music and soundtrack to that.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I think I'm just about old enough to remember them showing the proper 30s Flash Gordons and things on Saturday mornings.
Larry Buster Crabbe.
Yes, this has got one foot in that camp as well, hasn't it? In fact, it's got more than a foot. It's just dipping a couple of toes into James Bond. It is mostly melodrama, and it's mostly serial melodrama, which is what we get with Dalek's Master Plan. It's just this strange 4-week interregnum in ancient Greece, which is the oddity.
May I make a slight diversion?
Yeah.
I watched yesterday, or at some point over the weekend, I watched the Mind Warp extras, and there's a 2009 interview with Brian Blessed on there. And, at one point he said that he met the Queen, and the Queen has asked Brian Blessed to say Gordon's alive because she watched it with the kids quite regularly. Anyway, sorry for interrupting.
But I don't know how to follow that. I'm just not going to. Just going to pretend you didn't say it. Yes, you've already covered this with Jack, but she pointed out that it was a good idea that the actors weren't asked to produce impersonations of Edward D'Souza and the others, which is obviously true, but not just because impersonations would have meant that they would have not been inhabiting the characters, they would have just been concentrating on the superficialities, but it is so difficult. That style of acting was not in fashion in 1965. It was already. I'm not saying it was hammy or over the top, but it is big.
Quite stagey.
And I think what we get, I mean, it's hard enough for these young actors to channel that kind of style, that kind of tone, because that RP without, and they get just enough so that they can be those characters while not sounding 2019. Which we all do, don't we? None of us went to RADA.
No, I thought it was a fantastic effort by them.
And that chap playing Edward D'Souza is terrific. What a future he's got.
He brings a different emotion to it slightly, doesn't he? A different flavour. He's a bit more angsty than D'Souza, who owned every conversation he was in a James Bondy type way. Marco Polo. Sorry, I forget his name, but Mr. Polo, he brought a different energy to it, and I thought that was quite good. I actually thought Lowry was excellent.
Yes.
The guy playing him, I could see him in the actual 1960s version almost.
It was a more nuanced performance, because his performance actually, having watched him in close succession, his performance changes as the story goes on. From the moment, he's quite arsey with Mark Corey at the beginning.
Yes.
Because, of course, he is the captain, and he's entitled to give as good as he gets. But then from the moment the Daleks are brought up, he becomes very nervous, and which the chap in the original doesn't. So it's a nice extra touch. Fundamentally, what they did, presumably, was to let these actors listen to the original so they could get a feel for the atmosphere and the general tenor of the acting required, but then hand it over to them and say, interpret these characters, do act them, get inside them. And
Yeah,
we've ended
why
up
not?
with the
Yeah.
best of both worlds. I'm just very impressed. So
Yeah.
although I did have daydreams about somebody splicing the two versions together, the soundtrack of the original with the new images, apart from the fact that it clearly is impossible, I'm not actually sure it's necessary. We have two versions. Depends what mood you're in. If you want something really... Ow. Sorry, I just stabbed myself in the finger. Can you...
with a Varga
Depends what
thorn.
mood you're in.
Yes, it... so, very fitting.
If you start turning into a cactus in a minute, we'll know what's happened.
Oh dear. Shall I just drop in some random observations?
Do.
Things from the different versions. The thing that stuck out most to me in the cartoon, which is very nice, is the way the Vargas move. The animator clearly took one or two liberties, which is always a good idea, like giant macra. The Vargas wander around on their roots and their little feet, and they look very much. I think it's the Triffids from the 50s.
Oh,
the
yes.
Triffids film.
Yeah.
I think is what they've based that on. That's quite charming. Obviously, we wouldn't have got that in the original version.
I mean, they're one of the slowest moving monsters, I think, in the history of Doctor Who, aren't they? I mean, possibly only the angels, if you keep looking at them, would be slower.
Yes. Yeah. I just think one of the weaker scenes in the new version is when they don't really bring out the tension involved in sidling past a Varga plant as they're trying to escape from the spaceship. It's
Well, he almost brushes against it, actually, as he walks past.
Yeah. But I'm going to say something else nice about the new version. The camera work is, I mean, we'll never know, obviously, how faithful it is to the original,
No.
because we won't, will we? Of course we won't. But it's...
Well, unless... No, sorry, go on.
I think it does a good job of balancing, keeping to the strictures that you would have had in those days, because the big bulky cameras that barely moved would have created quite a static feel, and they've mostly stuck to that. There's one moment I noticed when Mark Corey shoots Garvey in the back to save Larry. That's quite nicely done. I think it's probably better done than it would have been in the original, because they include a little close-up. They cut a little close-up of Mark Corey in the background with his gun getting ready, and I don't think they would have been able to do that with the angles involved in the original. So again, it's cheating slightly, but what it's giving us is a version that's a slightly 110% version. It's not suddenly got lots of amazing tracking shots or pans and zooms, but it's just making the best possible version of what you could have done in 1965.
I'm glad you mentioned the video work, because I've been meditating on the resources that they had in Preston, and just look at the breadth of disciplines that those students and staff and postgrads have mastered to make this happen, from the set design to the video work to the editing to the acting to the sound to the costume design to the model work, because the Dalek spaceship was done on a model. I'm absolutely blown away by it, and therefore the breadth of the work done by these millennials in yes, it was a piece of academic work, but I'm just absolutely overwhelmed and touched by the effort that has gone into it. I really am. I'm blown away by it.
Yeah.
It's always nice when somebody else connects with you about something obscure that you have an interest in. I really want to, like Jack said, you want to ask many, many questions. I want to ask the students what the heck they thought they were doing. Did they think fair enough? Did they think, oh my God, what are we doing? Did they think, did it nurture an interest for them? Did they think it was boring or painful or embarrassing or great? I really want to
feel
know.
like being asked to dance, I don't know, do ballet in Wellington boots or something. You're trying to learn how to make a career for yourself in television, but you're being asked to pretend it's 50 years ago. Take away most of the tools that you would have if you were producing something for the modern day. But yeah, so I guess the question I would ask is, did they think when they came out the other end of this project that they'd learned any useful, that being artificially constrained like that had taught them anything useful?
I mean, looking at the YouTube making of, I mean, they all seem very enthusiastic and quite excited and involved. So, I think they must have enjoyed the experience. As you say, whether it's taught them anything useful, I don't know.
Just to round off my praise and a realisation that I had, is that they put it together in months. They filmed it in a week, but they were up against the 1960s BBC drama department. And they've done a pretty damn fine job. I could nitpick. They've borrowed bits, Daleks from here and there. One of them's 8 inches shorter than the other, his little brother, like the two Cybermen in Wheel in Space. Even the BBC did it. So I'm just really, really pleased and proud of them and happy and feel spoken to across the void by Mr. Holland, or sorry, I forget his name, and his love for this project and the work that the students have done. I'm absolutely bowled over by it. I think it's a very moving thing for me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Richard, you've watched the making of documentary. Perhaps you can answer a question I had. The music and background of special effects are very distinctive. Did they have the original recordings of those, or did they have to recreate them?
So as Jack said, it was quite a short making of, and that's a question I also wondered as I was watching it. It's not clear. It's not clear if they had to scrape it off the existing audio.
No, it's all stock. It's all stock music, isn't it? So I imagine they went in and got clean copies.
Yeah, that would make sense. And possibly that background atmosphere is... Yes, I mean, it could be one of the few sound cues. It would be original, wouldn't it? They didn't borrow sound effects because they had the Radiophonic Workshop. And it's one of the most distinctive and persistent backing scores. I mean, it doesn't stop for most of the 25 minutes, does it? It's amazing. And that's one of the things you associate most closely with 60s Doctor Who.
It stands out in Doctor Who because normally you're used to the Radiophonic Workshop stuff, or the music concrete style of music, and like you said, this is just sort of traditional melodrama,
which they didn't do very often, did they? I mean, it drops. I think
no, not
in
at all.
Web of Fear they drop in some stock music, don't they? Famously, and here and there. There's Tomb of the Cybermen stock music, but it's a different type, isn't it? It's not the old archive serial type that we're talking about here. So I mean, do you think it really just comes in punctuating odd moments and scene changes the music? And do you think that's because they had a constant backing score of atmospheric effects, so you didn't need music, or vice versa? I thought that was more likely than the idea that they added extra background sound effects to cover the lack of music. But they clearly thought of
the standard jungle effects, and it's all set in a jungle apart from various scenes, so it was all jungle effects or
I think they turn it down ever so slightly in the new version because it is incredibly loud and intrusive in the original. But it's the most distinctive thing about this episode, and it means that whichever version you're watching, you instantly get the same atmosphere because it is one of the strongest things that defines it.
Sure. I mean, I would just briefly say, I think it probably came across in the segment earlier on, but I was really excited by the news that it was going to be shown, and then I greatly enjoyed watching it as well. And yeah, I mean, it felt like one that I could almost check off the list of missing episodes. I mean, yes, as you've commented, as Jack said as well, there's still things that we could learn from seeing the original. But yeah, we've seen a very effective telling of the story. That kind of takes some of that interest away from me now for seeing it again.
There was a moment when they cut from being inside the ship explaining that he's with the Secret Service or whatever it is, where they cut back outside, and the effect they get on the camera really got under my skin. It just felt like you were watching 1965 Daleks in the Jungle, with it, the grain of the image or the darkness of the image. It was really palpable. I really felt like I was there momentarily, and that's quite something to achieve. I toyed with the idea that they were trying to recreate some of the 35mm stuff that was done and create a different effect, but I've talked myself out of it because the Varga stuff was done on 35mm in Pinewood or wherever they went to do that stuff. But I talked myself out of that. Some lovely touches on the credits.
Yeah.
Was it Jack who mentioned William Hartnell on there?
I don't think
or was
did,
that was that mentioned elsewhere? William Hartnell still gets his credit, but Raymond Cusick also gets a credit as well, and I thought that was lovely.
Yeah. You never quite got. I mean, you could tell it rankled perhaps increasingly as time went on, but it's always good to see him get a mention.
Yeah, no, I thought that was lovely.
There was one. If I'm going to pick one nit before we go, I did notice there's a very visible handprint on the dome of the Black Dalek at one point.
Oh, is that what it is?
Handprint. And I'm interested to know where that came from, because clearly Mavic Chen hasn't yet turned up. I mean, I don't think that Mark Corey slips in, to the middle of them while they're talking and slaps it on the top. So. Yeah, we were going to have to.
Yeah, that
ponder
poor old
that.
Black Dalek prop was a bit of a mishmash, wasn't it? But I'm not worried about it. Can I just pick up on something that you and Jack talked about?
Yeah, sure.
In that you snidely pointed out the Lancastrian nature of New Malfa's accent.
Lots of planets have a north.
Well, in my little note to talk about this, I put, yes, he might be from the north of Giron. But 3 actors played Malfa.
Right.
The
I know where you're going with this.
Do you? Don't spoil it for Richard.
Oh,
if he
no, I
doesn't
wouldn't
know.
dare.
But the first guy was in Mission to the Unknown. Then Malfa appears again in episode 2 of Dalek's Master Plan, and I don't think he says anything. He does a bit of table slapping.
What a demotion!
Slap happy he was. I'm not even sure you see his face apart from in long shot. But do you know who plays Malfa in episode 11, Richard?
No, I don't.
Paul.
It's Alf Roberts from
It's
Corrie.
Alf Roberts, Brian Mosley, the big lad who is out of shape in Get Carter.
Yeah.
And I saw this the other day, and I had to go and re-listen to episode 11 because he has more to do in that. And it's Alf Roberts. He could be on Coronation Street. I mean, he's from Leeds.
Knowing that, when I first watched this remake and saw the Lancastrian Malfa, I just assumed that's what they were going for, that it was a tribute to dear old Alfie. But
Yeah.
but no. Well, unless they were trying to create consistency. Maybe our clever Doctor Who fan producer and director is trying to create a link between that and episode 11, should that ever turn up.
That's very generous of you to retcon that in. I had been thinking about doing the same thing myself. So yeah, I don't know whether to feel sorry for Brian Mosley or whether that increases his kudos. But yeah, that's a thing. I will never think about DMP the same way ever again.
On that bombshell.
Yeah, are we done now? Or are there anything else anyone wanted to say?
Well, we have between us talked about this story for about 3 times its actual length. So that's probably a good point at which to bow out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, look, thanks very much. That's our Mission to the Unknown special. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we seem to have done making it. And if it's your first listen to Something Who, there's a whole raft of other episodes on our feed, both of this style of podcast and then the predecessor, 13 Cast, where we were looking at Series 11. And looking forward, the end of this month, we'll begin our cycle of reviewing the 3 Doctors, then the 5 Doctors, and Day of the Doctor as we head towards the anniversary month of November.
Not doing the 2 Doctors?
We have not intended to do the 2 Doctors, but you never know. You never know. But I guess we're looking at the anniversary specials across the eras.
I understand.
Thanks for listening. Please come back soon. And thanks, Tim, and thanks, Paul.
Ta-ra!
Goodbye!
Victory! And we didn't even discuss whether or not Mission to the Unknown was shown in Singapore.
Thank goodness.
How very disciplined of us.
Well, yes. I mean, I did allude to that.
Did you?
In the Jack segment. So yeah. But, well, I didn't. Well, I mean, I alluded to it being a possibility rather than getting into the long drawn-out saga of whether it was or wasn't.
Oh, was that the point at which? Sorry, I might have lost my attention for 20 seconds. Is that when she starts saying, "Don't give me hope"? Or
Yeah, well,
So
she
it's just-
mentions that Toby Haydock had just been talking to her about the Bond store.
The thing
Well,
is,
I
you
thought
see, Phil was telling us all different things. We realised
Yeah,
he'd be telling one person that he'd found all of season 3 apart from episode 3 of the Mythmakers, and he'd tell somebody else that he'd found it all apart from episode 2 of the Celestial Toymaker.
do you think that was so you could find out who was leaking?
Apparently, I wonder if he ever did find out.
It's a thing with Vardy, isn't it? If she was the one who was leaking. Sorry,
Who?
that's too much of a pop culture reference.
Yes.
Who am I playing Gearon? No, it's the ship from Gearon, but it had Malfa on it. It's very complicated, isn't it? I hope we're going to... Oh, no, you've already...
No,
covered
no.
that with
Are
Jack, haven't
you sure that's the case? Are you sure the ship from Gearon didn't have Gearon on it?
No, don't worry. The point is that they say, here comes the last ship, the ship from Gearon.
Oh, right,
And,
okay.
and then when they cut
And
to the
then
control
Malfa
room, they say,
turns
here
up.
comes the last delegate. It's
Oh,
Malfa.
right.
So people...
It's
It's one of
almo-
many tiny details that don't make any sense. But
It's
this is
almost as if you've
termination.
just been watching it.
And reading what other people have spotted. Not
Right.
as if I'd have spotted that.
The Children of 1965? 66?
66.
65.
65, yes.
Yes, as I said, 65.
Okay.
There was-
Hello. Excellently put off.
I didn't know you... Right, okay.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to Something Who. It's another of our increasingly common special episodes, this time looking at Mission to the Unknown, in the light of the recently released... in the light of the recently... Okay, I think I was a bit too upbeat to start off with anyway. I'm going to have another crack at that.
No one's died this time. But
Hello and welcome to Something Who. It's another of our increasingly common special episodes. No, our increasingly common special... Oh dear.
yeah, with me and Tim here. It's that works.
It's getting increasingly... Oh dear, no. Okay. Last one.
Hang on.